Good morning, I'm Mary Cronk. Welcome to Entrepreneur to Employee. Today we're going to cover on thinking about the total higher level view of getting into business ownership, how to choose the right business for you, the path to getting there, the thoughts that you probably should be having if you're moving that direction. So I thank you all so much for joining me. I am from FranNet. FranNet is an international franchise consulting company. For the last 19 years, I have been helping people mostly here in Central Texas invest in franchise companies. And I'll tell you a little bit about those services a little bit later, but for now we'll go ahead and get started with the presentation. If you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat box. I'll be sure to address them toward the end. Thank you all so much for joining me, and we'll get started here. So again, welcome to Entrepreneur to Employee. Today we're really going to talk about the higher levels of looking at different types of business ownership. A little bit on my background. I myself am a franchisee. I've owned 3 different types of franchises. I spend a lot of time volunteering for organizations like the Small Business Development Center and providing education on franchise ownership and business ownership in general. As we go through today's presentation, I would like for you to kind of take stock and think about who you truly are. I believe that in business ownership, there are great implementers and there are great innovators. Great implementers make terrific franchisees. They're able to take a formula, if you will, a recipe, a business plan put together by someone else and effectively implement it in their local market. Great innovators are the true entrepreneurs. They are the people who want to create every system, every process in their business from scratch. In my house, we have one of each. I'm the great implementer, great franchisee, and my husband is the great implementer. So as we talk today, think about who you are and how that might apply to the type of business that you're looking at getting into. I mentioned earlier, FranNet, 32-year-old franchise consulting firm with offices throughout North America. We work very closely with the Small Business Development Center, and you all are in great hands with the folks here who are putting on the Rural Challenge today. My goal is to help people find franchise fits for them. And I'll tell you more about that later because I think it fits no matter how you look at getting into business ownership. You want to make sure that you're finding the right fit. My services have no cost to my clients. If I'm able to help them find the right franchise fit, I'm compensated by the franchisor, and that's totally transparent to the person getting into the business. So with my help, they get a focused and efficient search. So that's what I'm hoping to share with you today, how to make your search focused and efficient. So start by thinking about what your life would be like if you had your own business. Would it be better for you? What would it look like? What would it feel like? What are those overarching goals that you would have for starting a business? What I typically find is people I talk to have some combination of the things that you see here on the screen. They want to make sure that they can achieve success, however they define that. But I find other things come into this as well. Money, both short-term and long-term, time flexibility is kind of a big deal too, and just control over decision-making process. So think about what these things are for you because you want to start by kind of putting together your target with your goals. What's interesting about most people who look at business ownership is only one actually gets into business out of 100 that look at it. A lot of people will choose to work for someone else. And typically when they do, it's because they're concerned about risk or they're concerned about the money it's going to take to get it started. They're worried about knowledge of the industry that they're getting into, or they're not sure how to find the business that they're looking for. And they may feel that running a business takes talent and skill. And I think you all would agree with me that these are the reasons that that people have for maybe not looking. But the big elephant in the room is simply the fear of failure. No one wants to get into business and have it not work out for them. So I'll just hit it right up front. A part of my experience is in business brokerage. That's the sale of existing businesses. And the calls that we love to get on our business brokerage line are from people who want to enact their exit strategy because they can take the multiples of cash flow they can get for their business and move on and do something else. The calls that we hate to get are from people who have to get out of the business because something wasn't right from the beginning or something went wrong somewhere along the way that could have been foreseeable. You know, if you ask the Small Business Administration why businesses fail, they will tell you the number one reason is undercapitalization. So making sure that you have enough money to start the business and live through the business, getting it started up over time is very important. You know, another thing that we typically see as kind of a pitfall is someone has attached their emotions for the product or service that's going to be provided by the business as their main decision criteria for getting into the business. You know, I had an opportunity to speak with a gentleman in San Antonio who had owned a handmade ice cream store. That store was sold twice. And I asked him, you know, why did you get into the business and why now did you want to get out of the business? And what he said to me was, this is a place that I took my kids after soccer practice and football practice. There always seemed to be a line out the door. It seemed like a really good opportunity to get into. And I said, well, it sounds pretty good to me. You know, why didn't it work? And he said, I never took the time to figure out how I was going to manage and operate this business. He said, I have a perishable inventory with the ice cream. And he said, I have a lot of turnover in employees because I employ most of the local high school students. And if they don't come to work, it's okay because their mom or dad's going to give them the money anyway. He said, if I had to do this all over again, he said, I would have made sure that I was on top of the hiring because I really found myself standing behind the counter scooping ice cream. And I had never imagined I was going to do that. I had always imagined this more of a manage-to-manager type of investment. Another thing that comes up frequently is people try to get into a business in which they have industry experience. And sometimes the challenge there is they see themselves performing the function of what the business is and not necessarily working on the business. You know, I can tell you that in franchising, when we see somebody who wants to work in the business and not on the business, usually that attention is misplaced. And sometimes when people think that they're going to get into a business in which they have industry experience, they actually think they may know better than a franchisor. You know, in an independent situation, when people think about performing the function of the business, a lot of times they never can get out of doing that. So they don't know how to actually transition to really working on the business rather than in it. That may be an important consideration for you. Another thing that comes up is what I'll call misplaced passion. It usually comes up in one of two ways. The first way really is in the function of sales, right? People tell me if I believe in it, if I have faith in it, you know, I can sell anything. And the reality of it is if they're going to get rejected 99 out of 100 times, it can be really disheartening. So making sure you have the right skill set to run the business is really important. The passion should be more focused on that growth. The other challenge that I think comes up really puts the middle two really in play together. Someone tells me that they would like to make their hobby a business, and it's because they see themselves performing the function of that business. And chances are, no matter how passionate they are about that hobby, once they start to mass produce it, it becomes work. And a lot of times the focus isn't in the right place. So forgive me if I land on your hobby with this example, but I get calls a lot from gentlemen that tell me they'd like to own automotive repair businesses. And it's because they imagine themselves cranking wrenches because that's what they do for fun in their garage. But once they start cranking wrenches, again, it's mass production and nobody's working on the business, which is really important to cover the marketing, the advertising, handling the financial aspects of the business, and the hiring of the technicians who should be performing the function of the business. So when you think about passion, think about what you want this business to do for you. It may be that the right business for you isn't something that's going to be connected to a hobby or even an industry that you know something about. It may be completely different, and it allows you to leverage your skill sets and allows you to get in and really grow something that could be great for you and great for your family and still meet your overarching higher level goals. You know, there is that fear of failure, as I mentioned before. But what I find is great business owners feel it. They recognize it as a normal part of what they're going through, and they really do their research to get their facts together to decide if there's something there that is going to make sense for them. A lot of people who allow their decision-making process to be driven by fear just cut it off. They just decide that, you know, they've got some feelings about what's going on, or maybe some opinions about what's going on in the industry itself, the type of business, the market, the economy, and they never choose to find out for sure if what they're thinking is true. So I challenge you, as you look at business ownership, to think about getting all of your research done. And when you make an assumption about something, go back and figure out, is it really fact or is it possibly fiction, something you were just thinking of? You know, for a lot of people, making this leap from working for somebody else to working for yourself is a big one. And I find that people are really considering risk. The people who actually take the leap, in my experience, are the people who have asked themselves the questions that you see here. They wonder if going back to work for somebody else short term is going to make it, or keeping the job they have is going to keep them secure and safe, and will their performance guarantee that they get to stay? You know, long-term financial goals for security and retirement are also very important. And I count myself really lucky. My stepfather was an entrepreneur in El Paso. And when I graduated from college, he sat me down and he said, okay, Mary, if you want to create great wealth, you need to do a few things. You need to own your own business. You need to own real estate. You need to own blue chip stocks and high risk stocks. And I said, great, that sounds wonderful. How do I get that done? So that's really been my life's work since I was 28 years old. And I'll never look back. For a lot of people that I talk to these days looking into business ownership, they're really looking at doing some form of these things as well, really diversifying their income and making sure that they're going to see some security there. When you own your own business, the risk is front loaded. So I can tell you it's going to be scary, but the longer you own it, the safer it becomes. No one can take it away from you, and you decide how large or small your business is going to be. So for a lot of people who have worked for other folks, they've played by the rules, and people are starting to recognize those rules are changing. They're really looking for that income security for the future. So a lot of people really are worried about risk, right? And what the impact the economy is going to have. We just went through a pandemic, maybe still going through a pandemic. So you really want to look at business options that have specific market characteristics to kind of help you get through those economic conditions. There are businesses that are in growing markets, growing markets driven by demographics. That could be our aging senior population, our dual income households. The other things we see are essential services. Our hair grows, we have to eat, we have to maintain our health. And let's face it, if the washing machine hose disconnects from the washing machine, it's got to be addressed straight away. Then there are businesses that help other small businesses. A lot of small businesses outsource certain things. We've seen an uptick in business coaching and digital marketing help, staffing, employee training. There are a lot of opportunities out there. So as you look at building a business, you want to think about what you live on yearly, but also what that build is for the future. You may want to look at what your retirement goals are and how having a business helps you to get to those goals. And in order to do that, you've got to be able to understand how money is made and kept in business ownership. You've got to be able to estimate your return on investment. When you work for someone else, your largest form of compensation is your W-2 earnings. When you own your own business, you tend to want to minimize W-2 earnings, and you can do that because you have legal perks of ownership, the ability to write things off to the business, and you can grow your business with pre-tax dollars. And what you have is an increase in equity. What's interesting about equity is it's the most overlooked assessment factor when people think about getting into business. But it's important because it's the selling worth of the business on the open market. And that can be your big contribution to retirement. So let's talk about some of the business ownership options and how to look at these things. We'll get into some of the pros and cons. You know, a lot of people think they'd like to start a business from scratch, meaning a small independent business. And with that, again, this is where your innovators really thrive, right? They love the idea of total control, making all the decisions, creating all the systems and processes from scratch. They can be as creative as they want to be. There's no predetermined rules for starting a business up, and you could build it from passion. Now, granted, I recommend building it from passion and making sure you have the skill sets necessary to run it, that intersection there, and surrounding yourself with people to help you for sure. But if you do this right, it can have the largest upside. Some of the disadvantages are creating those systems from scratch. You know, if you're an innovator, this could be an implementer, this could be a real nightmare for you. Also, in starting a business from scratch, you may have limited financial options for getting that business funded. And you may have a slower ramp up with that business because there's a lot of trial and error as you're trying to figure out what works and what doesn't. And sadly, starting a business from scratch really has the highest failure rates of any type of getting into business, if you will. Some people like the idea of buying an existing business. I can tell you that that can be great if you find the right ones. You have to make sure that you look beyond just what the business can make for you. You have to, again, make sure that you have the skill sets necessary to continue to propel that business forward. And I think that's a hang-up for a lot of people that look at buying an existing business. The advantages can be you've got existing cash flow and goodwill and actual financial results for the business. It's a bit more attractive to lenders because there's already a track record there. You could have an established market, a good customer base, employees in place, and maybe that seller will do some owner financing for you. Some of the disadvantages are really getting to the heart of what the cash flow is, or whether or not the business has a bad will, or perhaps it's overpriced. You may not get a lot of training from a seller, so you really have to make sure that you know what you're doing. There may be some hidden seller motives. Some of the employees may leave as a part of the seller leaving as well. And with an existing business, you will have a higher debt service because these businesses are priced at a multiple of cash flow plus the assets of the business. And looking at franchising, you know, this is really where implementers can shine. Right? Because the advantages are, if business to consumer, you may have some name recognition to it, a trademark, you have proven business systems. A franchisor usually proves those systems out in their corporately owned stores, and early franchisees help with that. You get training and support coming from the franchisor. They tend to have a lower failure rate as a result. There are more financing options for a franchise because there is a track record there. Franchising has disclosures that must be made to you before you invest in the business, and I'll tell you a little bit about that here later. And if you're the type of person that likes to have other counterparts doing the same thing you're doing, people to compare notes with, you can have a franchise family, not just from the franchisor, but also the other franchisees around you. Some of the disadvantages can be, this isn't where you're going to find bleeding edge technology as a function of what you offer as a part of the business. However, it could have wonderful technology for running the business that you're in. So there may be fewer industry options. You may have some structured operating systems. There may be territory restrictions for the business that you're looking at, and you're only going to sell their products or services. You're also going to pay ongoing royalties for that help and support of the franchisor. What a franchise is, it's the license to use the name and trademarks, products and services, and business systems of a particular business. In exchange, what you pay is an upfront franchise fee and ongoing royalties. Upfront franchise fees are not big money makers for franchisors. Their interest in having a franchisee who has their brand in the market is really those ongoing royalties, because usually they're a percentage of sales. So the franchisor benefits as you're growing. So that's their vested interest in you in helping you grow that business. As I mentioned, franchising has a disclosure. The Federal Trade Commission says a franchisor must offer you as a qualified prospective franchisee a franchise disclosure document. And inside, they must disclose 23 different items to you. Everything from the experience of the franchisor to whether or not they've had any litigation, a spelling out of the total investment within ranges. They must tell you about their fees, franchise fee, royalties, those sorts of things, your obligations to them should you become a franchisee, and theirs to you. They're going to tell you about patents, territories, trademarks. What most people want to know is, how much money can I make if I get into this business? And if that franchisor is going to tell you something about that, they have to disclose it in item 19, which is financial representation. Outside of item 19, they cannot make financial disclosures to you in terms of earnings. But that's okay, because when you look at franchises, you also get to talk to their franchisees and understand how the business is performing for them, and they can answer those financial questions. You know, starting your own independent business will range based on the type of business that you're looking into, your budget for it, your activity in it. Buying an existing business, again, I think you really want to have a budget for that, because you are going to pay more money for that business because it's already making money. I think in looking at franchising, a lot of people think it's very expensive to get into because they see freestanding buildings on corners with golden arches, right? So I think most people are pleasantly surprised to see that the total investment for franchises, at least for about half of them, is about $250,000 or less. And there's no automatic correlation between what the business costs and the profits that it can earn. It goes back to how you plan to grow that business and your activity in that business. As far as funding sources go, there are many different ways you can fund a business. One is you can fund it through personal savings. Got some cash on hand? That can be a great way to go. You also may be able to use home equity lines of credit. If you've got good credit score and those sorts of things, that may be a good path for you, assuming you've got good equity in your house as well. A lot of people like the idea of SBA lending. That would be the Small Business Administration guaranteeing loans to the bank to make the bank feel better about loaning you the money. What I can tell you is most of the small businesses will either fit into the Express loans or the SBA 7A loans. With 7A loans, you can expect to bring 20 to 50% of the total investment from your cash on hand. They like to know that you have some skin in the game. You're going to put some cash into it. They also may ask you for collateral for that loan. And in Texas, if you homesteaded your house, you will not be using that as a collateral form. So you may want to think about where else you go for that. The other things that come up are your character. Have you been someone that's paid your bills on time? Do you take care of your business? They're going to look at condition of the industry that you're getting into as well. They want to make sure that that is going to work for you. Oh, goodness. There are a lot of considerations that go into looking at bank financing. Not every bank has the appetite for what you are getting into. So shopping and making sure that you understand what type of lending they're doing for what types of businesses is helpful before you ever apply for a loan. A lot of people don't know that you can fund your business with retirement funds without tax or penalty consequence. 401ks and IRAs, That's a really interesting way to look at getting into business and actually holding your cash for covering living expenses as you're getting into it. If y'all would like to know more about that, we have a funding webinar that comes up once a month. If you'd like to put your email address in the chat box, I'd be happy to get you some more information so you can explore that and learn more about the lending processes. You know, of all the ways of looking at getting into business, I think the one that really deserves the most attention, especially from a financial perspective, is involving other people in your business. There are pros and cons. You know, one nice thing about it is you never make a decision alone, or that can be the biggest nightmare for it. If you're going to have relatives as a part of it or loaning you money, you're beholden to them to make sure that you pay them back no matter what the circumstance. If you're going to involve a partner, you want to make sure you have a good partnership agreement from the beginning and you know who's actually going to be focused on running that business. At the same token, you want to have a good buy-sell agreement from the beginning with that partner. And that's putting together the exit strategy from the beginning, because you don't want to get into the business and get to where you're ready to get out of it and start fighting over who gets what and tank the business in the process. The buy-sell agreement actually predetermines what the exit is, so it's a smoother transition for you and that partner. So lots more thought going into those things for sure. So if you decide to look at franchise ownership, just know that most of the opportunities out there are in very stable industry. There's going to be a lot of competition. Franchising is about taking disproportionate market share from the moms and pops out there because of the consistency of the customer experience, the systems in place, the processes in place, those sorts of things. There are franchises in food, automotive, retail, business to business, and home and personal services. You know, I think what you can expect from the total investment, if you're looking at food concepts that are more quick service restaurants, maybe $800 to over $1 million total investment. Fast casual, more $400,000 to $800,000. And then your food trucks and your snack concepts, anywhere from about $200,000 to $400,000. And these are ballparks. And looking at automotive businesses, you can expect to spend about $200,000 to $500,000 total investment. Retail is about the same, about $200,000 to $500,000. If you're looking for a business to get into under $100,000, maybe up to $150,000, you may want to look at business services or home and personal services. They have lower cost of entry because they don't have the bricks and mortar of the top three. The big difference here is with business services, you or someone you hire is going to have to sell your product or service to other businesses. So keep that in mind. So again, as I told you in the beginning, in looking at business ownership, you want to think about what your target is, what your business model is, and start by thinking about what's important to you. You know, for some people, the challenge, the recognition, the prestige of business ownership is pretty important. For others, it may just be building that equity for retirement or having more time for family and your interests. You want to think about what independence and control mean to you and how those fit your goals. And of course, your financial security, short-term and long-term. You also want to look back at your career. What did you do that you really did well that you would want to repeat in a new business? Because you may find that aspects of those things fit maybe a couple or several of the boxes you see here on the screen. But what's important is, as the owner of the business, you're using your very best transferable skills. You may hire the other pieces. In the case of a franchise, the franchisor may have systems and processes to help you with the other pieces, but you really want to make sure you're playing to your strengths as the owner. And so other elements of your business model, besides your personal, your professional goals, may come down to criteria. How many employees would you like to have? What types of employees are you comfortable with? What are your two budgets? One to live on as the business is ramping up, and one to fund it. You may also want to think about the business environment and what that means to you. Are you going to put in full-time or part-time hours managing your business? Is the business going to be open full-time or part-time hours? You may look at the number of locations or territories you may need to have in order to have the size business that you want. You may want to think about what types of customers you're comfortable with. Do you want to offer a service or a product or even both? Do you want a newer industry or something more established? Is there room for growth where you are? And any other items that could be important to you. When you're finished, this is what it should look like. Ha! No pressure. This is just a sample of a business model that I built with one of my clients. But you can see in the upper right, the business goals, the personal goals, very, very important. Down in the lower left, you see the business characteristics. The other things that you see here on the screen actually come from a proprietary entrepreneur profile that we use at FranNet. If you have interest in filling out this profile and just learning more about yourself and business ownership, whether you want to look at franchising or not, I'm glad to go through that with you. Just leave me your email address in the chat box and I'll be glad to follow up with you. So when you look at business ownership, I told you before, you've got to be able to do a lot of research. When you do that with an independent business, the research is all up to you. Every element of the business, where you go for that information, could come from a myriad of places. When you look at buying an existing business, most of the research comes from that seller and maybe a business broker that they have in place to help you. When you look at a franchise, there's a lot of different places that are already built in for you to go to actually learn more about the business. Once you've built out your business model, the target we talked about, it's a matter of finding franchises to consider. Some people go to the internet and look by industry, and some people work with people like me because they want more of a focused and efficient process. No matter how you find the franchise, it begins with an initial phone interview with the franchisor. And I use the word interview because it's a two-way street. You're looking at the franchise and wondering if it's going to be a good fit for you. And they're looking equally hard back, wondering if you're going to be a good fit for them. In that first call, that franchise development person should tell you what their due diligence process is and take you through it step by step. Because they know you don't know what you don't know, and they want to fill in as many informational gaps as possible. The second major piece of this is actually the franchise disclosure document, and I shared that with you all earlier. Then you have opportunity to talk to franchisees, at least 6 to 10 franchisees, to really understand how the business is working and operating for them. This is also your opportunity to ask them questions about the financials and figure out what it's going to take as you're putting together your pro forma and make sure that you're on track with where you need to be with the business. And you have plenty of forms of reference by talking to a number of franchisees. Ultimately, if you think the business is a good fit for you and the franchisor agrees, they're going to invite you to come and visit them. They might call this discovery day or meet the team day or join the team day. But no matter what, at that point, they're giving you more information on the business. And you're going to be doing kind of a cultural check to make sure you believe that that franchisor can help you be where you need to be with that business. From there, you may ask an attorney to review your franchise agreement and your franchise disclosure document. And that's really how you're getting to your yes or no decision. FranNet has its own roadmap for success in looking at business ownership and actually looking at franchise ownership at frannet.com. Again, if you'd like to give me your email address, glad to follow up with you on that as well and get that sent over to you. Additional resources for looking at business ownership, you're going to need an attorney, chances are, maybe to set up your corporation, maybe to review documents in the case of franchise or perhaps a lease, depending on the type of business you're getting into. And you're going to want to have an accountant who can help you come tax time, pull everything together you're going to need. If you'd like to do some more exploration and reading, I recommend the eMyth Revisited. This speaks to the systemization of businesses, and I think it's an incredibly good resource for that. As a follow-up to it, I also recommend Built to Sell by Jim Warlow. That speaks to building your business to a really nice exit as well, really building that equity into it. If franchising is of interest to you, you may have interest in more than just French fries, which is written by a bunch of my counterparts here at FranNet, and street smart franchising as well. If you would like to learn more about franchise ownership, please just let me know. I'd be glad to help you any way I can. And again, my services have no cost. If you would just like to, again, see what your entrepreneur profile would look like, I can tell you that what it gives us is about a 15-page report all about you. We look at things that actually drive motivation and getting into business and how those things align and intersect with value sets to understand what make a business right for a particular type of person. We look at leadership style, management ability, sales ability, meta strategies. If you'd like to include financial information, we can also talk about where your funding options may come from. So again, if you'd like to learn more about that, just send me a note in the chat box with your email address, and we'll continue from there. People often ask me who invests in franchises and what kinds of franchises. Again, I think a lot of people think it's just food out there. But if you look at some of the backgrounds here and the companies that these folks come from, you'll see that these people chose businesses in which they didn't have industry experience. The key piece of this was making sure they had leverageable skills in order to run the businesses they got into. The other key to this is making sure that these businesses fit their lifestyle goals. So this gentleman here at the bottom, the general manager from the cafeterias, he was someone who was very good at operations. He was good at managing staff. He could scale a business on a daily basis through the restaurants. So when he came to me, he wanted those elements as a part of the business. The business that he chose was a lawn care franchise. And interestingly enough, when I met with him, his wife was 7 months pregnant with our second child. And he said, you know, Mary, I think I need a food franchise. That's what I know. I know cafeterias. And she patted him on the leg and she said, you know, honey, that sounds just great. Just please be sure you're home every night and on the weekends. So we learned very quickly that perhaps a food franchise wasn't going to get it done. But the lawn care franchise was open Monday to Friday, 8 to 5. And he could scale that business as he added business. He could add equipment, add employees, staff that business on a daily basis. And he was actually written up in his local newspaper 10 years later in the lifestyle section talking about how his business allowed him to have the lifestyle that he wanted. So keep those things in mind, you know, think about what those goals are for you. I thank you all so much for joining me for this session. It's a pretty quick thing in about 40 minutes to cover quite a bit of ground. So if you'd like to know anything in particular, I'd be glad to answer any questions. If you all would like to copy this QR code, let me know what you thought of this particular session. That would be great. You can use the bit.ly link as well. I am going to stop sharing and just look and make sure we don't have any questions to get to. So again, I want to thank you all so much for being here. Hey, I think I've got an Aggie here, so thank you for the whoop. Glad you enjoyed the presentation. Any questions or thoughts? Y'all are a quiet crowd. We have some extra time. I'm glad you all enjoyed it. I'll give you a quick fun story since we're just kind of hanging out a little bit. I had a client recently decide to get into business and fund his business. He's relatively young. He took more of a territory outside of the Austin area, more of a rural area. He has been able to grow his business very well. He just got on such a roll with it. He really rolled up his sleeves and put some time into it. What's interesting about him is he came from the oil fields. He actually came from learning all about leases and oil field transactions, more of the real estate transactions, and he's used all of that operational experience to run a service business. So that's one that's been kind of fun to talk about here recently. I had another couple that I recently worked with who had a real affinity for pets. They got into a business where they're actually servicing dogs. They actually have a membership, a grooming business, a membership base where the dogs can be groomed by people that they've hired, or the owners can come in and actually do the grooming. And again, it was such a nice caveat of passion for the business itself because they love dogs, but also the operations to run it. And the gentleman came from the operational side and sales side of a lighting company. So he really understood what it takes to kind of drive people into a business like that and hire the right people. He gets a lot of joy from growing people. So that's going to be a fun one to watch as they grow. But lots of different things out there, a lot of businesses that would surprise people in the realm of franchising. So, if you think it might be interesting to take a look at, it may not be what you think it is. There may be some surprises out there. Another couple gentlemen that I'm working with actually that came through the Small Business Development Center in San Antonio came to me hard set on we must have a restaurant. And one of them is very astute in building out a major retail brand. That was his background coming from that. They fell in love with a business in trash, actual trash collection, recycling. Again, Monday through Friday, quicker to ramp up. Easy to scale as a part of what they want to do. And so now they've kind of come to this idea that they're going to have multiple businesses under the same umbrella and start with a service business and then get into a restaurant later because they still have that passion for that, but they like the idea of the way the other business grows for them and the opportunity and time that gives them more at night and on the weekends. So they were really shocked when I brought trash to their attention. So it can be a lot of fun to look at these things. Well, I welcome you to contact me anytime. If you need any contacts at all here between Austin and San Antonio, I'm glad to help you any way I can. Thank you so much, you all, for your time today, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the Rural Challenge. Thank you.